Well, Mr. Park In-Cook and distinguished guests, I want first to thank the Fudan University, the Fudan Development Institute, and the Korean Foundation for Advanced Studies for putting together this very important Congress. The theme today is about the Asian future and Asian innovation. My view on these things is that much of what I would say for Asia would apply to other parts of the world as well. My inclination to do is to talk about the basic financial infrastructure that allows economic growth. I think the miraculous economic growth that we've seen in China and other Asian countries in past decades has had substantially to do with their improvements in their financial sector. The Asian countries have reacted well to the financial crisis that began, I would say, in the United States in 2008. It was not of their doing, but it was visited on them. And the Chinese economy has gone through a period of continuing growth throughout this crisis, partly because the government embraced modern stimulus policies that made up for lost export demand. And the Chinese economy has involved a lot of government expenditure on infrastructure, which is something that I approve of very much under these circumstances. But I don't think that it's a model for the distant future. And it seems that some of these infrastructure investments may be nearing their saturation point, and we have to move the economy, the Asian economies in a different direction. So what I want to focus on is really the financial infrastructure. In 2003, I wrote a book called New Financial Order. And in 2012, I wrote a book called Finance and the Good Society. The word good society may be hard to translate, but it's about the kind of human society we'd like to live in, and that we would like to see as humane and inspiring our best creativity. This is a theme of my most recent book. I think finance is actually a pillar of civilization, that just about anything important that one wants to do depends on some kind of long-lasting organization. Usually, short-run projects are not important. It's long projects involving lots of people. Finance is a technology for sorting out the costs and benefits of projects, creating organizations that go beyond one human life, that last for the centuries, and incentivize people who themselves are not long-lived to join in as part of a big project. That's what finance is all about. Unfortunately, there has been popular prejudice again. I got a kind of long quote here from a 1904 book by Charles Conant, and he remarks that, this is talking about the United States in 1904, that most people think that financiers are just gambling. And he said he was startled to note how many intellectual people think that finance is just completely corrupt and is just a game, like a casino. But he said it's so obvious to someone inside that everything that happens is directed by finance. Well, I still think we're in that situation, that financiers are just not lovable. Okay? Some of them are crooked, and we hear about the crooks all the time. Most of them are not, but the bad reputation covers them all. This is a problem that has to be dealt with. Now, one reason why people often think that finance is is useless or is just gambling is they have the impression that financial prices are just crazy. It's like people playing a game of dice, and the game goes one way, then it goes another way, and it means nothing overall. Well, I think there's actually some truth to that. I have one slide here from my Nobel lecture, and I don't know if I have time to explain this. This is a little bit technical, but what I'm showing here is the blue line is the United States stock market from 1871 to the present. And the other lines, the green dashed line and the red dashed line, are present values of dividends paid under alternative assumptions. But just to put it this way, that's what the market should have been if people knew the future, if they knew the whole future of business. I guess I don't have time to explain this, but the point is that the stock market in the United States has gone up and down and up and down, and it never meant anything, because the underlying fundamentals were just growing steadily. And you have events like that. You see 1929, the market lost 85% of its value in a few years. And there's 2000. And you see these big swings. They don't seem to make any sense. Well, my conclusion is, at least in the United States, they didn't make any sense. But there's still a role for financial markets, because there are so many different ways they take form, and this one, which attracts the most attention, is the least important. You're going to give me a tough time break on this. One thing that prejudices people against finance is the perception that many people are just playing some stupid game. And there's some evidence that that goes on too. There is a remarkable paper by Barber, Li, Liu, and Odin that looked at evidence from Taiwan about day traders. These are individual people who trade in and out every day. And so they said, let's take a look. How do those people do? Do any of them make money? And the basic conclusion is, a few of them do, but almost all of them just, they end up losing so much money, they just drop out. So we see this kind of thing happening. There's a lot of spinning wheels, a lot of game playing. Another thing is that financial institutions deal with so much economic power that it generates opportunities for people for corrupt activities. So I have a new book coming out with George Akerlof called Fishing for Fools, and it's about the downside of a market economy. But we actually still think that market economies are the way to go. So we have 2 cheers, not 3 cheers for free markets. But the bottom line is that what we need is regulation. And both government regulation and industry regulation, that is self-regulation. But regulation is costly, and I think this must be a dilemma here in China as well, where the GDP per capita is not as high yet as in other countries. So the cost of regulation must deter it. And of course we have to do some kind of cost-benefit analysis on regulation and not impose onerous, costly regulation. Nonetheless, regulation is central because of this tendency for corruption. Lawyers. We need lawyers. And now I hate to say that because so many people, for them, lawyers bring back bad memories. And they have to do with human conflict. But you have to have lawyers, because if people don't think that they can get the law enforced properly and get behind their activities, they won't start businesses. They won't be doing business. Now here's a little mission for China, which is to increase the number of lawyers. Israel is the #1 country in the world for lawyers, 1 per 169 people, and it's one of the most entrepreneurial and successful innovators in the world. You go down to China, it's 1 per 8,000. So I'm not a lawyer, but I think you need more lawyers in China. Personal financial advisors. Now here, no country does really well. In the United States, there's only one personal financial advisor for every 1,000 people. I don't know what it is in China, but I'm pretty sure it has to be increased. Because if people don't understand what they're doing, these systems are so important and so complicated. You need someone to explain it to you and help you prevent errors. Now, there are problems. In the United States, we have an organization that I was very impressed by called the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors, which is an association of people who offer advice to the public, NAPFA. I was impressed by the organization, but you know what? They have only 2,400 members. That's 1 per 100,000 people in the United States. And on top of that, two of their former presidents were convicted of corruption, and one of them is in jail for 16 years. So it's inherent to the system. It's not inherent to any one country that corruption springs to life, even in organizations like this, which is ultimately idealistic. So I think that we need government subsidy for financial advice, legal advice, and we need regulation. Now, China has gone through a number of steps in the last, 30 or so years, and I have a list here but some of these steps are quite recent, which suggests to me that they're not fully worked out, they're not fully implemented. I was quite struck that China didn't even allow short sales of stocks. Now, finance theorists say that short sales of stocks are very important if you want to have an efficient market, because if you don't allow short sales, you can let cheerleaders push up the price of one stock, and there's nothing skeptics can do about that. There's a lot of financial innovation. I have 5 minutes, right? I haven't seen my 5-minute warning yet, but now the thing is that as China develops, it has to get more and more onto the forefront of financial innovation, and that means experimentation. The target is constantly changing, especially with new information technology like the internet. There's a lot of experimentation going on, and China should be, and in fact is already, part of this process. So I mentioned first example is subprime mortgages. That was a financial innovation which allowed people with poor credit to get home mortgages. Unfortunately, the whole thing blew up and caused a financial crisis. But that's the kind of thing that happens in a vibrant economy. Don't blame these people for... subprime mortgages were issued by the so-called shadow banks. Now we're seeing shadow banking developing in China. It sounds evil, but it's not. I think there's a proper role for shadow banking, and including complicated mortgage securities, which are much maligned now because of mess-ups and mistakes and some corruption. But the underlying core idea is good and important. Then I have several more recent innovations which I think show a lot of promise. Benefit corporation, crowdfunding, social impact bonds. I'll just go through them quickly because I don't have much time. The benefit corporation is a new corporate form that is halfway between for-profit and non-profit. I believe it's very respectful of human feelings. People want to have a purpose beyond just making money, and a benefit corporation allows that. Another one is crowdfunding. Websites like kiva.org, it's actually kickstarter.com, I got it wrong there. These are websites that allow people to invest in companies, and millions of people around the world could invest in, or kiva.org is to make loans, microfinance loans. I discovered crowdfunding has reached China with a website called demohour.com, which is a Chinese website that is doing things like financing cartoon series. These things will grow further, I think. The World Bank has written a recent report saying that finance is going to be more and more internet finance, and it's going to be more and more global and less driven by traditional banks. or the banks will have to transform themselves. Social impact bonds are bonds that are designed to finance a social project. Like, for example, in the year 2010, the UK government issued the so-called Peterborough prison bonds through a complicated financial arrangement done by a nonprofit called Social Finance. The problem is the Peterborough prison outside of London was releasing many ex-criminals who would then commit a crime immediately after they got out. And there was a problem there that something wasn't right. And the government was unable to solve it. So they created a free market system to try to solve it. The bonds will pay out only if the problem is solved. So the people who buy the bonds have an incentive to try to solve the problem. Another thing is philanthropy. I think that a culture of philanthropy is part of a free market system. And it ought to be. The real problem is that a free market economy will make some people fabulously wealthy. That's just the way it is, because of the power of being on top of financial technology. What do you do with all this money? It's corrupting. Just the presence of money is corrupting. If you give it to your children, will it make them happy? No, it won't. They'll feel a loss of purpose. As Robert Frank described in his book, Why Money Fails to Satisfy. It has to be part of a social consciousness that I'm making money now, I'm going to give most of it away in the future. We also need, and this is something for China to think about, in order to make a philanthropic feeling stronger, it's important to have a tax system that involves a charitable gift deduction. You can have high marginal tax rates on high-income people, but also give them a charitable deduction so that if you give it away, you won't be taxed. China has apparently, as I understand it, a weak charitable deduction right now because it limits it's limiting of the kinds of charities that are approved. It has to be more allowing people to be creative in their philanthropy. And I think that it would make more charitable donations coming from the people. Finally, this is my last slide. I wanted to say that finance is going through a revolution now because of the development of behavioral finance. That is psychology applied to finance. And people are not machines. They're not computers. They have feelings and they have higher aims. They're psychological. I learned some of this from my wife Ginny here, who I want to thank the forum for showing a book launch for her book, Rewards for Kids, which we had yesterday here in Shanghai. What she is into is education for children that creates a sense of independent spirit, maybe a philanthropic spirit and creativity. This is one example of what I mean by behavioral economics or behavioral finance. So what we have to do, and what I say we, that's everyone in the world going forward, and that includes Asia, is that we have to improve the functioning of our financial system, which is a broad social. It means getting the financial system more involved with people, making it clearer to people how they can achieve their highest aims through financial structures. And it involves experimentation. When you talk about, I saw these identifying new dynamics. I see that right up there. What I'm thinking is identifying new dynamics means first experimenting, then having some mistakes, then finding that some people learn how to game the system, and you got to stop them from doing that. Work around the potential for corruption, and then watch what other countries are doing. It's all experiments from one country apply to another. It's a very slow process to identify the new dynamics. So what we have to do is not do it ourselves. We have to set up a system that encourages other people to do it. Thank you.